this morning, as we prepare for a conversation about missions, I'd like to begin with a discussion on, get ready for this is a big one, inaugurated eschatology. A few people like eyes bugged out of their heads for a minute. Kiddos, I want you to say this word with me. I'm gonna say it first, then I'm gonna say one word, I'm gonna invite you to say it, I'm gonna say another word, I'm gonna invite you to say it again, okay? So, you ready? You ready? Inaugurated. Say it with me, inaugurated. And now, eschatology. Say it with me, eschatology. Parents, if your kids use that in a sentence later today after we've learned this, like, I'm not trying to write a check that you have to cash, but that feels worthy of ice cream or something like that to me. It's a big word. I want to teach it to you today. I'm a theology nerd. I love learning things like this. So inaugurated eschatology is a theology of the kingdom of God. For those who aren't theology nerds, in a lot of Wesleyan circles, we use the phrase already and not yet. And inaugurated eschatology and already and not yet are both referring to the same thing. So let me break this down for us. You might remember this once upon a time, several months ago. We talked about eschatology. And eschatology is the study of last things. It's a study of the end times. And essentially, when we're speaking of eschatology, we're talking about Christ's second coming and the fulfillment of his kingdom. We've got eschatology, but then we've got that word that comes before it, inaugurated. Now, that's a word that most of us are going to associate less with theology and more with politics. Right? We see this once every 4 to 8 years in our nation. The votes are in. The new president and vice president are in. They stand up at the podium and they make their speeches. They give a pep rally for the entire nation, casting vision for the next 4 years as they step into office and are inaugurated. When we speak of inauguration, we're saying the person is now officially in office. They have been initiated. They have arrived. If we were to go to Webster's, we would find that inauguration is defined as the beginning or introduction of a system, policy, or period. So when we speak of inaugurated eschatology, when we speak of already and not yet, we're speaking of his kingdom, which has in many ways already come, but is yet to be fully realized. We have yet to see it in its fullness. And the idea is that Christ coming the first time started an initiation of the kingdom of God. Through his life, death, and resurrection, the kingdom is already here. It has been inaugurated. But it's not yet fully realized because we still exist in a fallen world. And so we wait with great anticipation for the day when Christ comes again and he brings that kingdom in its fullness. Inaugurated eschatology, already and not yet. And there's a beauty to this because as Christians, we have hope, not just for Christ's second coming on that day when he will come again with glory, but we have a hope that glory is breaking through the cracks right here and now. We don't have to wait for eternity to see the beauty of his kingdom. We have a foretaste of it in the already as we wait for the not yet. But what does that have to do with missions? Hold that thought with me. If you have your Bibles would you please turn with me to Acts 1, verses 6 through 8. Again, Acts 1, 6 through 8. So, amongst theologians, Acts 1:8 is regarded as the quintessential missions passage. It is like the top dog when we're talking about missions. And within this passage, we find Jesus' last words to his disciples before he ascends. And within it, we find the challenge, the mission, and the purpose of the church universal as a whole. And so today, as we conclude our discussion on our church values and we talk about missions, it feels significant to read what Jesus says about it in Acts 1. That feels like the most important place to look. We find his words in Acts 1, 6 through 8, which reads, "Then they gathered around him and asked him, 'Lord, are you at this time going to restore the kingdom to Israel?' He said to them, 'It is not for you to know the times or dates the Father has set by his own authority, But you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth. Within this passage, we can find two major ideas that help us to establish a philosophy of missions. Man, I'm seeing so many Bills jerseys right now, and it just makes me so happy. I'm ADD. It just gets me fired up. Y'all are great. Keep cheering for your team and keep coming to church. It's worth it. So, two major ideas. And the first idea that we have is hope. The disciples go and they ask Jesus, when are you going to restore the kingdom? They have this hope. Their discussion begins with it. And Jesus' response is super interesting. His response is inaugurated eschatology, the hope that we have in the already and not yet. Jesus says to them, it is not for you to know when that day will come. But then he goes on and he says, but you will receive power, and you will be my witnesses. When the disciples ask Jesus when he'll restore the kingdom, he responds, don't worry about when I'll restore it then. You go and build it now. Let me worry about my part. You worry about your own. This line makes me think of the film Remember the Titans. Anybody know that movie? Anybody ever watched Remember the Titans? I went to see that when I was in middle school, and it makes me feel really old that it's now considered a classic, right? But it is one of, in my mind, greatest sports films of all time. So this film takes place during the time when our nation was still segregated, and it follows a high school football team from a school that has just chosen to integrate. And right from the get-go, because of the time that it takes place in, there is a deep tension as these two schools become one. And things get even more tense when the school board decides to give Coach Boone the head coaching job at the school, which just so happened to be the job that belonged to Coach Yost, who's now being demoted to assistant. Each of these men feel caught in this political game. Coach Boone doesn't want to take Coach Yost's job because he knows that Yost has earned it. Coach Yost doesn't want to be an assistant because he's up to be put in the coaching Hall of Fame. But each of these men see the needs of their players. If one coach doesn't step up, one group of players likely will go unnoticed. If the other coach doesn't step up, the other group of players likely won't play at all. It becomes clear that the integrated team is going to happen with or without them, but the only way it's going to work for everybody is if it involves both of these coaches. And so for the good of their team, these guys set it all aside and form a tenuous but incredibly successful relationship as a coaching staff, with Coach Boone as the head coach running the offense and Coach Yost as the assistant running the defense. With neither of them necessarily agreeing with each other, but each of them consistently choosing to trust the other. Almost every game in the movie, when things get tough, when these guys might be tempted to disagree, fight, or bicker, we hear a phrase echoed between them. Don't you worry about my offense, you worry about your defense. I'll worry about my defense, don't you worry about your... Sorry, you know what I'm saying. I'll worry about my defense, you worry about your offense. When they're saying this, they're telling each other, trust me to do my part, I'm gonna do it. I'm choosing to trust you to do yours. They argue and they bicker a little bit, but they each inherently trust each other, and as they grow in their trust, they build an undefeated state champion football team. When the disciples ask Jesus about the kingdom, his response is, I'll worry about my offense, you worry about your defense. I'll worry about my not yet, you worry about your already. Jesus is the head of our church body, and he is our head coach. And his part is to bring the fullness of the kingdom on that day when he chooses to do so. And his part, as he says, is to send the Holy Spirit to give us the power to build that kingdom here and now in the already. And then our part is to simply go and build it by the power of the Holy Spirit. And we build it, as this passage says, by witnessing to people, by bringing people into his kingdom. Because have any of you ever seen a kingdom without people? We call that a plot of land where I come from. That ain't no kingdom. A kingdom without people ain't a kingdom, but a kingdom with people is wonderful. Our part is really just as simple as going and telling people about our Jesus. Our missions begin with our hope in him for the there and then that we share in the here and now, that he's going to give us the power to do. The first thing that we see in Jesus' discussion on missions is hope. And the second that we see is scope. Jesus has a much broader scope on where this hope should go than even the disciples do. So when the disciples ask him about this, they ask Jesus specifically when he's going to restore the kingdom to Israel. And Jesus responds, "You will be my witnesses to Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth." At this point in time, the disciples are Israelites. These are still men who have been brought up in the Jewish religion, and in a lot of ways, we see it in the passage itself. Their understanding is that Jesus is there to rescue Israel. In their mind, Israelites, Jesus is theirs. He belongs to them, and in turn, their focus was narrowed to the people that they belong to. And Jesus is inviting them in this passage to broaden their scope, to share not just with the people who are around them, who are like them in Jerusalem and Judea, which were parts of Israel, but also to the people who were unlike them, the people of Samaria who believed very differently than they did, and even to share with the people who are far from them, to go all the way to the ends of the earth so that every person might hear the name of Jesus. But what does that mean for us today? I don't think there's a single person in our church that's thinking, Jesus is mine, all mine, nobody else deserves to get him. I don't think there's anybody in the church in the world that thinks, Jesus is mine, he's all mine, I don't want to share him. No, I don't know where that came from. Like that was kind of embarrassing. Like there are a lot of people shaking their heads like, that man is definitely a Polak. Yes, I am. Wow, I got applause for being Polish. This is a beautiful moment in my life. I would wager if we struggle with sharing Jesus outside of our Israel, outside of the people we know, outside of the people that are like us, it's not because we don't want to share him. I think it's because we're afraid to. If I'm being completely honest, it feels a lot more intimidating in this day and age to share the gospel with somebody than it did just 10 years ago. The world that we live in is much more hostile to divergent opinions than it has been in a very, very long time. We exist in the middle of a culture war, where if we think differently, people are apt to just unfriend us. We exist in the middle of a cancel culture where one wrong word can destroy not just a relationship, but a reputation. We exist in a world of us and them. And there are so many sources telling us that we, the us in this story, should be afraid of them. It's hard to tell somebody about Jesus because we exist in a world where it feels dangerous to disagree. But honestly, I think that danger might be a lot less than we would realize. I'd like to tell you about Gabe. Gabe is a friend of mine from back home. To be honest, Gabe isn't his real name, but Gabe feels as good a name as any. And so if you're in here and your name is Gabe, I promise I'm not talking about you and making up stories. One day, sitting in a coffee shop that I sometimes worked from back home, I heard one of my favorite songs by one of my favorite bands playing on the radio. And me, being me, I didn't even realize I was grooving until I'd already begun. I sat there tapping my toes and bobbing my head. I'm starting to move my hands. I know I'm not a good dancer, but I'm going to do it anyways right on this stage. And as I tapped my toes and I bobbed my head, this other guy who frequented the coffee shop, Gabe, who was apparently just as shameless as I was, started to sing along. And he was really belting it. Before I knew it, I was spending the next 20 minutes with this guy laughing about how foolish we both looked and talking about how much we both loved this band. And just like that, our friendship formed, just because Gabe and I liked the same band. But we didn't just like the same band. Gabe and I also liked the same books. A few weeks later, I walked into the coffee shop with a big book by one of my favorite authors. And right away, Gabe looks and he goes, Brandon Sanderson? That's one of my favorites. And the next thing I know, we're talking about all the series that this guy has written. Gabe and I shared a mutual love of board games. I don't know how that one came up. We had the same favorite movies. Just about every conversation we had, we found what a deep sense of kindred we had. Gabe and I were practically carbon copies. And those conversations continued when we started talking about faith. The day that Gabe found out I was a pastor, he was fascinated. He asked me all kinds of questions about my church, told me a lot of things about the church he had grown up in. As we discussed the mission of the church and theology, we discovered we were on a very similar wavelength. For months and months, we saw each other multiple times a week. We shared a cup of coffee, and we talked about anything from music to video games to Jesus. And with as alike as we were, I was totally open with this guy about everything. I shared my every thought, my every hope, my every dream, my struggles being a pastor. I was as vulnerable as I could possibly be without any fear. And then one day, after months of friendship and months of vulnerable conversations, Gabe told me that he was actually an atheist. He had once believed, and just so many doubts and fears had boiled over in his heart that he just didn't anymore. He probably would have even said that he wanted to, he just didn't know how anymore. That same day, this is a really good friend of mine. I feel very confident asking the question, what's that like to not believe? What does it feel like to go from this thing that you found so much life and purpose in to it just being gone? And his response, I'll never forget it. There was a different gravity by the time I'd finished this question. Gabe stopped looking me in the eye. He hung his head as he stared off into the distance at nothing in particular. His shoulders slumped as he seemed to sink into his chair. The weight of the world had just pressed into this man's shoulders. And for a brief moment, we sat in silence as he weighed all of the thoughts in his head. When he finally spoke, his voice was so quiet and hoarse that it was almost a whisper. "It's scary," he said. "I'm scared. It is hard to think that this," as he gestured to the world around him, "that this is all there is, that this is it." Then he turned back to me and he locked eyes with me once again. And I promise you I'm not lying. I promise you I'm not making this up. As he turned back to me, he said, "Jordan, I want you to witness to me. I want you to witness to me now, and I want you to witness to me more." This is a person that I had approached differently because I thought he was so much like me, right? I thought we were both in Israel. I thought we had the same fundamental beliefs. And in turn, I was very confident talking to him about Jesus. And while if I'm being completely honest, to this day, I've not led Gabe to Christ. Gabe has given me an open invitation to genuinely try to do so. And to this day, anytime we talk, Jesus is one of the primary pieces of our conversations. I think that the world has trained us to believe that everybody who thinks differently than us will hate us for thinking differently. If they aren't in Jerusalem or Judea, they're going to be hostile. But this passage is calling us to go to Samaria and to the ends of the earth regardless. And true, this is honest. In all of my experiences, every single one, and at this point I have had many, so long as I've been respectful in the way that I speak, the people of Samaria have welcomed the invitation to hope. And honestly, that moment with Gabe, that's the moment that really compelled me to be bolder, where now I have multiple conversations like this. "I'm scared," he told me. The look on his face, the slouch of his shoulders that showed the weight of the anxiety he was carrying, the way that he hung his head. His body language alone, even if we factored out the words, painted the picture of the hopelessness that he felt. This was a man who'd become a brother to me, who needed to know hope, and here I am with it. How can I not share it? If we see a person in need and we have a way to help, we have a moral obligation to share. Let me illustrate. My shoulder is shot. You all know my shoulder's shot, right? We've talked about this before. Most of you know about my shoulder woes. During our wedding, one minor tweak has led to many sleepless nights, all kinds of aches and sharp pains, and eventually a loss of range of motion. Just putting my shirt on in the morning has become an arduous task that sometimes involves the help of my wife. I've had a few doctor's appointments. They haven't really panned out. I have one coming up in a few weeks that I'm really excited about. I'm optimistic for the not yet that's coming to my shoulder. But that doesn't change my here and now. A few weeks ago, we were having lunch with Dwayne and Julie Wilkins. And I don't even remember how it came up. But let me tell you, some of my friendships have been formed because we like the same bands and same music and same video games. My friendship with Dwayne has been formed because we have mutual shoulder injuries. More and more we talked, the more I was like, oh, you too? You also can't put on a button-up shirt? That's wild! That right now Dwayne's like, dude, that was a vulnerable moment. Stop talking. The more and more we talked, eventually Dwayne said, wait a minute. I've got this little medicated roller thing that gives me so much relief. When I put this stuff on, it doesn't hurt anymore. The next week, Dwayne and Julie showed up with this roller thing that I've since learned is pretty expensive. Thank you guys very much for that. For those joining us online, there was just a very sweet little "you're welcome" from a child in the front. Let me tell you, that roller is strong. It is so strong. It doesn't just numb my shoulder, it makes my eyes water. It doesn't just make my eyes water, it makes Claire's eyes water, even if she's sitting 3 feet away from me. But even though it makes my eyes water, it also makes my shoulder stop hurting. It's, for the first time in a very long time, I have relief. I had a problem and I had a pain. I had a struggle and a need. And Dwayne, who had once known something similar, had a solution. And because he knew the relief that it had brought to his pain, he couldn't help but share it with me. For us as Christians, there's a real sense that Jesus is ours, right? He doesn't belong to another religion. Christ goes with Christian. But as people who have learned the hope that he offers us, how can we not share it with those who don't know it? I genuinely believe we have a moral obligation to share, not just with the people in the chairs next to us in here, but with our neighbors out there and with the people who aren't like us in our community and with the people who are far from us all around the world. This is a world that can feel so hopeless. And we who know hope have an opportunity to change that. We have Christ's command to do so. And so as the worship team comes forward and as we move into a time of response, because we know Jesus, we know hope in the already and not yet. And because we know the hope that Jesus brings, he's inviting us to broaden our scope and carry that hope to the world around us. And today, as we have the privilege of participating in communion, we proclaim that hope to each other and to ourselves. We proclaim the hope of a Christ who came to die on a cross, who broke his body and shed his blood for us, that through his resurrection, his kingdom might be inaugurated here and now and prepare us for its fullness in eternity. And so what I'm going to ask as we move into this time of response, as the worship team is playing, if you would come forward from the center aisles, and if you would grab a piece of the bread and one of the little thimbles of juice and bring them back to your chairs and wait. We will take this together at the end of the song. At North Collins Wesleyan, we practice open communion. If you are a believer in Jesus Christ, you are welcome to join us at this table. We would encourage it. Every piece of bread we have today is gluten-free. And if you're not comfortable with this kind of buffet style yet, we do have prepackaged elements on the tables at the sides. But whatever the case, come and participate in the hope of glory that we have. Grab a cup of the juice, a piece of the bread, wrap your way around, and then at the end of the song, we will all take this together. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your love and grace and mercy, and for your kingdom that is breaking through into this world, that you're inviting us to participate in right here and now. And God, as we step to the table together, would you give us a glimpse of the hope of glory that will come as well as we celebrate all that you've done for us? Be uniquely present in these elements and be uniquely present with us here today. In Jesus' name, amen.